All right. So as you can see up here, this is a pie chart. I hope it is somewhat to scale. If it's not, please don't judge. It is what it is. But I was doing a little bit of research this week, and I came across a study that was done by the Pew Research Center. Pew is the last name of a family. Usually they do a lot of grant or subsidized kind of things that lead to big research projects. And the title of this one really stuck out to me, which was the population of the world in terms of different religious groups. And so maybe we can make this an activity. So maybe we can kind of guess what you think each of the different religions here are. So what do you think the 31.2% is? Christianity, yeah. So I don't want to, okay, I'll just write it out. Christianity. All right, how about the 24.1%? Muslims, yeah. Or Islam, yeah. All right, the 16%. Buddhist,
Whatever China is.
The 16% is unaffiliated, is what it says, unaffiliated.
Is that like atheists?
Yeah, or just they have no yeah. How about the 15.1%? Hindus, yes. 6.9? Buddhists, yeah.
Does Buddhism include Confucianism and Taoism?
I believe it was just all grouped together, as far as I know. I don't know. How about the 5.7%? No, that would be under the umbrella of Christianity. Yeah, 5.7%. I thought this was interesting. They call this folk religions. Folk religions. Yeah, like all the weird
Like
tribal. Yeah.
What about the Wiccans, they call it?
Yeah, just all sorts of those kinds of things. All right, 0.8 and 0.2. So 0.8 is what they call other religions that are maybe just hard to identify or maybe just not, yeah, just random ones. And then the 0.2 were Jews or Jewish. Pretty small. Okay. Interestingly, the title of this study was as such. It was that Christians remain the world's largest religious group, but they are declining in Europe. That was the kind of the title of this study. And so I know what they were trying to do, and I know that if you look at this chart and you see this statistic, you think, wow, that's pretty good, and maybe meant to serve as an encouragement. But as someone who was studying the religion of Hinduism and seeing this percentage, I was encouraged to see this, but I was also deeply burdened when I saw that. Right? And because maybe there's one number here that will translate better, which is 1.1 billion people. 1.1 billion people in this world are Hindus. Okay, that's a startling number of people that don't know or believe Jesus is Lord. Sorry, grammar stuff. 1.1 billion people who don't profess or believe in Jesus Christ as Lord. So if it's anything that I can start off with is this is why we're doing this. And this is why we'll be covering this, because in Buddhism, the number translates to 500 million people. 500 million people are Buddhists in this world. So that's a large population, a large chunk of people who don't profess or believe in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And so this really necessitates why we're doing this and why we're covering these different world religions. So that by knowing a little bit about the history and just the background and what they believe in these religions, we're able to have great dialogue as Christians. Okay? So that's kind of where I want to start with today. I'm not sure if Steve covered this, but I want to just do it for the sake of clarity and just for us to understand the different categories of religion as well. And this is probably familiar for most, but I still want to cover it. Religions will fall into one of three categories generally. Monotheism, polytheism, and pantheism. What is monotheism?
One God.
One God. Okay, so what are some of the religions that believe in one God?
Muslim.
So I'll put Islam, obviously Christianity, and Judaism. Good. Now, obviously, where we differ in this is who the person of Jesus Christ is, right? That's where the fundamental differences come. But we believe in the idea of one God. All right, how about polytheism?
Many gods.
Many gods, good. So smart, I know.
I've studied this a long time.
Good. Poly meaning many, theism meaning God, so many gods. All right, and so what are some of the religions that are polytheistic? Hinduism, good. Whoops, why did I put that?
Greek.
Good. Roman Greek mythology. Hans, you want to just teach this? Anything else? Any other religions that you guys that are strongly or primarily polytheistic? Many gods?
Mormonism?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Actually, I didn't have that, but they do in some respect, yeah. And that's pretty much it. I had like New Age. I don't know if that's a religion, but it's more philosophy or like other Eastern kind of religions that are not as clear. But yeah, this is primarily most of the polytheistic religions. How about pantheism? Anyone know what pantheism is? Hansel?
No God. That's all gods.
Huh? All gods, yes. Pantheism, interestingly, believes that all is God and God is in all. Right? So it's interesting, but it's this idea that a tree can be God, a rock can be God, an animal can be God, the sky is God, the sun is God. Just anything materially in creation can be considered a God. Any examples of pantheism that come to mind for different world religions? There's folklore, yep. And I know Hinduism actually has a lot of that too. But I'm going to write Hinduism because there are some aspects where they are polytheistic and oftentimes where they're also pantheistic as well. Buddhism, good.
I thought Buddhism didn't have any gods.
We'll get into that next week. After. Huh?
Shinto fall under pantheism?
Shi-
Japanese, the Shinto.
Shinto. Oh, okay. It might. I'm not familiar with that.
And then maybe,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like animate and inanimate objects. Can have.
Animate. Okay. Is that how you spell it? Shinto?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah, classical and Zen kind of philosophies or religions come with that as well. All right, so that pretty much covers it. And so the reason why I wanted to break this down for us is so that we understand and know where Hinduism falls into. It's clearly not monotheism, right? But it's either polytheistic and often pantheistic. Anyone want to guess how many gods Hinduism has? Anyone want to guess? 500? Okay. Thousands?
Don't they combine other gods? So like they would use Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and like
They claim a lot of gods,
they
but yeah,
believe
so
that
just
everything is like God.
so give me a numerical value.
Like infinite.
Infinity gods.
New religion pops up, like you'd be like, oh, that's a religion.
I'm gonna add you in that pie chart, Hansel, right here. Hansel is what we'll call it.
No, but isn't Hinduism, they pretty much like accept other
They
gods,
do.
right?
They do.
Yeah.
They're very accepting. There's a strong tolerance for gods of many other different religions, and even incorporating the pantheistic ideas as well. Any more guesses? I heard hundreds, thousands, 100,000s.
300 million.
How did you know that? That's actually more or less the answer. Yeah. Some statistics say about 300 million. I read another one that said 330 million. But that's crazy. That's crazy. 300 million different gods. Now, I know a lot of it will fall under this category, but yeah, there's a ton. There's a ton. And so sifting through that, let me tell you this week, it was pretty hard and very crazy. And actually, I was like, no, I'm just going to use that as a fact and then just move on, because that's a big number. But Hinduism embraces a lot of gods, a lot of gods. And so that is something that makes it a very kind of complicated religion to kind of sift through. And what is this really getting at? What are they really trying to teach here? Okay. All right, so I'm going to break Hinduism down into kind of different categories. First is the historical background. Where did it originate from and all that? And obviously its beliefs in who God is, their concept of salvation and what that entails. And then we'll spend the last remaining portions of how do we engage with Hindus in terms of theology and so forth. Okay? So let's start there. So the word Hindu, it originated not as the name of a religion, actually, but as a geographical marker. As a geographical marker. Actually, the word Hindu derives from a Sanskrit word called Sindhu, which means river. Who said river? Anyone? Oh, you knew that. Okay. Yeah. Sindhu, which is river. And so sometime within the first millennium, BC, the Persians invaded a portion of a land I'm just rough geographical. But they inhabited a land, right? And this is actually the name of a river that divides Pakistan, Afghanistan with India, which is called the Indus River. Indus River. Okay? So what I'm getting at here is that what happened is when the Persians invaded and took over this land, instead of calling this like Sindhu, right, this area of the river, they mispronounced it and called it Hindu. By accident. Instead of Sindhu, they called it Hindu. And so they designated this land around the Indus River Valley as Hindu instead of Sindhu. And then 1,000 years later, roughly about 700 years after Christ, Muslims invaded the same land in this Indus Valley area. And to distinguish themselves with Muslims and non-Muslims, they called the people Hindus. So this name kind of stuck as a mispronouncement of this word here. So that's how the name Hindu actually originated. So the name Hindu, it's a name that was given by outsiders to denote a geographical marker or location. This river is very big, by the way, when I saw on a map that divides these lands here. But it had nothing to do with religion and beliefs about anything. It was actually just a geographical marker, and to distinguish later people that were Muslim versus people that were non-Muslim. So what's interesting too is that the Hindu people actually didn't really embrace this word until a couple of centuries ago, like identifying as being a Hindu, because it's a name that was given to them rather than one that they kind of came up with on their own. Like I said, there's about 1 billion Hindus worldwide. Majority of them are in India. Roughly 78 to 80% of India are Hindus, are Hindu people. So a lot of then this continent, this region, this area of the world is where you see most of this religion being kind of believed, practiced, and lived out. and also India and Nepal as well. Okay, so that's kind of the background in terms of how this name came about. Like I said, in terms of beliefs, Hinduism is really hard to kind of pinpoint because a lot of their philosophy, a lot of what they embrace, it's still ongoing. Like they'll take in new ideas, new teachings, incorporate them as part of their history as well. And they also think about the idea of time and their beliefs in a very cyclical fashion. Obviously, many of you guys know the concept of karma, right? Reincarnation, right? But everything kind of is this. So the logic a lot of times is a lot of circular reasoning, meaning like it just doesn't land on any finite concept or idea, but they're just fluid. And it could be, a lot of things are up in the air when it comes to that. So there's no necessarily starting point or ending point. And then what's even more difficult is that the origins of Hinduism are unclear. Because like I said, the background was all about this geography and this land. So this actual teachings and stuff, it's hard to pinpoint like, this is when it started. This is when it started. For example, like Islam, which began with a specific person, Muhammad, right? Hinduism doesn't have that. There isn't a specific person that's attributed to the origins of this religion as well. And it's, like I said, a continuously evolving religious system. One more thing that I want to say about its beliefs also is that a lot of Hindu beliefs, like I said, with the region that I pointed out, is deeply intertwined with India in terms of its culture, the customs, the practices, social economic status, family, politics, even portions of their diet. A lot of that is incorporated into Hinduism. So you see that then Hinduism is very specifically tied to a culture, which is in India. Any questions so far? Any? Okay. All right, let's go forward. How about the concept of God? How do we sift through the 300 million plus gods that Hindus have and believe? Even though many polytheistic religions believe in many gods, usually they focus on one in particular as kind of the god among all the gods. And so in Hinduism, it's called Brahma. And so this is considered the supreme god, the god of all gods. Brahma is an entity that's believed to inhabit every portion of reality and existence throughout the entire universe. So, in other words, it's kind of like Star Wars analogy. It's kind of like a force. It's like a force. It's something that kind of permeates, that you just, it's all in all of reality. That's kind of how they describe Brahma. It's like a force. Brahma, interestingly, is impersonal and unknowable. Okay, we'll get into why that's important later. Impersonal and unknowable. And then it's also believed to exist in three separate forms. Three separate forms. Creator, Brahma, creator, and then Vishnu, which goes as preserver, and lastly Shiva. I thought of Puzzles and Dragons when I thought. There's this game that I got hooked on that I am not hooked on anymore, but there was a character. It was called Shiva, so that's what. But Shiva means destroyer. So basically what I'm saying is that Brahma, this entity, this force, it's kind of broken down into three different kinds of presence, or what it does, or in terms of what it kind of, accomplishes, so to speak. But it's broken down. So creator, preserver, and then destroyer. Okay. And then these facets of Brahma are also known through many other incarnations of these. And so that gets confusing as well. So I'll leave it at that. Okay. So just remember this word, Brahma. That's kind of the god that they worship among the millions of others. Okay. How about texts? What are the main Hindu texts? The main ones are called Vedas. Vedas. Vedas are considered the text for Hindu people. There's so many others, and I was trying to look through them online and try to read a few of them. It's just hard to find, and it's hard to sift through. But there's the Upanishads. Maybe you guys have heard this, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana. There's also the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, thank you. Bhagavad Gita, which is another, yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Are you familiar with this?
No,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, okay, yeah.
For yoga, is that connected to Hinduism?
Yes, yes, yeah.
I
Yoga,
think they have, in classes, they announce, is it
Vedas? Uh-huh.
Vedas that they-
Oh, okay, yeah. So yoga is a practice that's deeply Hindu in origin in terms of, beliefs and stuff. Yep. Good.
Those yoga
Just say you're stretching.
Just lost my train of thought. Just think of burning yoga mats right now. Okay, yeah. And so, I'm not going to write all those different ones, but just understand that there are a lot of different texts. For us, we have a Bible, which is a collection of all these different stories, but it's just one Bible, right? There's not another one or a but they have so many different texts. And depending on the different sects and the different kind of regions and belief systems, some people follow or believe more of one book than another. But you may wonder then, what makes someone a Hindu? What makes someone a practice of this specific religion? And every Hindu person, as far as I know, regardless of their beliefs and different practices and their preference for certain texts over others, they all believe that the Vedas are a sacred text. So every Hindu person or anyone that can call themselves a Hindu will primarily focus and believe in the sayings in this book, in this teaching, which are the Vedas. Okay. Now, interestingly, with the Vedas, it's more than just a theology book. In fact, what you see in Vedas, as I was kind of looking and researching, there's a lot of different hymns, incantations, different philosophies, different rituals, poems, and stories by which Hindus base their beliefs on. So it's not just, this is God and who God is and so forth, but there's a lot of mythology that's incorporated into these texts. A lot of that too, like I said, it's rooted deeply in India's cultural history as well. These stories, these mythologies, and so forth. Okay? Yes?
Who are the authors of the Vedas, and what makes them sacred?
In terms of authorship, as far as I know, those are unclear as well. Yeah, I know Hinduism is known to be one of the world's oldest religions in terms of how it's claimed to be, but there's no origin or starting point that can be traced back to. So it's just a bunch of writings that kind of got passed down or found throughout history. But there's not a single authorship either in terms of the text, as far as I know. So that's what makes it even more confusing. And also a question then is the authority of those texts. How do we know that one? And so that's why I said some people will focus on one text more than other, and then that's when it gets confusing, because it's who's not to say that this text has more authority than another, right, and so forth. But as far as I know, the Vedas are the text, but I don't know about the authorship. Yeah.
Are they still being made?
I don't think they're being made, but I think they're being added to. So Hinduism is one of those fluid kind of religions where they embrace all these different philosophies and cultural things that are still evolving. Right? And so that's interesting to learn too, is that it's not just, okay, it was written here, it ended here, this is the text, and it stops there. But it's constantly evolving and growing as well. All right. How about the concept of salvation? Salvation, as far as it pertains to Hindus. What is their understanding of salvation? Most of you guys know this word. Can I call upon my star student, Hansel?
Yeah.
Can you explain what karma is?
So according to my knowledge, what I hear people say is, when I hit them in the head, they would be like, oh, bad karma. And then I'd be like, huh? What is that? And then I finally realized that we're referring to the Hinduism religion, like bad karma.
Okay, so can you like...
Word karma?
So it's like
Yeah.
something that'll return to you. I don't know, some bad vibes. I don't know, I haven't studied that.
Jason, can you help him out? Energy? Okay. Energy.
It's kind of like a credit system in which if you do something good,
Okay.
it for some reason will kind of make your reincarnation a better life.
Good. Very good. So karma is like you kind of reap what you sow in a respect. Yeah. So if you did a lot of good things, right, the hope is that in the next life you'll have a better life than you did in the present. Right? And then so forth and so forth. And then of course, then on the flip side, if you have a really hard life and you're suffering a lot, there's a lot of pain, then Hindus believe that it's because what you did, your actions in the previous life carried over to your present life. So this whole idea with Hindus is that they believe that their present life, right now, right here, was determined by actions that they committed in a previous life. Yes?
What if your life just goes from like being really bad to being really good?
Being really bad to really good. They'll still find some way to link it back to the past, a previous life. So if it was good, then be like, oh, I must have done good things. And then if it's something really bad later in life, oh, it must have been because I did this in a previous life.
Is it always related to previous life, current life, or can it be within the context of my current life too?
I think as far as I researched, it was more on the previous life because they believe in the reincarnation and that the whole idea is that in the next life, they'll have a better life. And so it's like a carry on. But I do think though, some aspects of karma do infiltrate what they think about the present life, but maybe even more importantly in the future life. So when they did something really bad in the present life and they're aware of it, then there's like this fear of, oh man, that means my next life is going to be not so good either. Or I haven't progressed as much as I had hoped to. So they'll very much think in that sense of, oh, I messed up or I did something bad, so now I'm not going to have a good reincarnation. Or I don't know how they talk, but that's something along those lines.
That's interesting. So therefore, I know they have the caste system, and I mean, do they have levels of caste as well? Because I know when once you're a caste, that's it for life.
Right. So the caste system is, heavily, cultural in what you'll see in India as well. And yeah, a lot of times they'll believe like I'm poor or I'm in this situation because of what I did in the previous life as well. So a lot of times I think Hindus will believe that their circumstances too is a product of the life that they lived in the previous life. And that the hope is that if I live a good enough life with my circumstances now, that I'll have a better reincarnation in the next life so that my life won't be as difficult as it is now.
It's like for them, in order to move up the caste, you have to be
Right,
good.
yeah,
If
that's
they're
what
good in the lower levels, so that
Yeah.
when they die, they get reborn into an upper caste.
Right,
And
but
it's-
they'll stay as caste forever.
Yeah, unless somebody goes
Yeah, it's a
in
very
there.
impressive,
Interesting.
it's a very impressive system.
Right. Very impressive, yeah. Yep. So then Hindus believe, that if a person's behavior before was evil, they might justify that experience with tremendous hardships in this life. Like, oh, it's because of something that I did. So pain, disease, poverty, how as you mentioned, caste system, or disaster like a flood, they believe is deserved by that person because of their own evil actions, usually from a previous lifetime, but maybe sometimes even in present life as well. So that's the concept of karma. So as you can imagine, every Hindu person wants to escape karma, right? Wants to escape from this. So what their hope and their desire is to get out of this cycle of karma and life, of just reincarnating over and over and over and over again. So in fact then, the spiritual goal of a Hindu person is to become one with Brahma, with God, with this God. That's their ultimate goal. They want to become one with this God, with this Brahma. And this freedom is referred to as what they call moksha. Which is kind of their word or their idea of salvation, is that it's final liberation, final freedom from this cycle of karma and just reincarnating over and over, is that to achieve oneness with Brahma and this freedom and liberation of the soul, and in the ways that they speak, is called moksha. So until then, moksha is achieved, a Hindu believes that he or she will be repeatedly reincarnated in order that they may attain this oneness with the Brahma. So 3 ways that they believe that how they believe this is possible is to be lovingly devoted to any of the Hindu deities, specifically the Brahma. So like worshiping or praising their Hindu gods, and most namely the Brahma. Grow in knowledge through meditation of Brahman. Grow in knowledge through meditation. This idea of oneness is mentioned quite a bit in their religion as well. So that idea is to realize that circumstances in life are not real or reality, but in fact that our selfhood, they believe, is an illusion. And only Brahma or Brahman, I make it a noun, is real. And so what's happening here, us inhabiting this body and all of those things, to them it's all an illusion. It's all illusion. And we're deceived, and we need to ultimately attain oneness with Brahma in order for us to see reality and all those things. Some form of that. This is all to say, guys, that in terms of salvation and as it pertains to salvation, Hindu is a very strongly works-based religion. I hope that's abundantly clear, that there's no idea of grace, there's no idea of undeserved merit or favor in the things that we believe in as Christians, but this is all work. This is all work, and that living a good life will hopefully lead to a better reincarnated life, and hopefully through a series of reincarnations will lead to this oneness with Brahman. Yeah.
So how is good defined then?
Good defined?
Within Hinduism?
Within Hinduism? I would say it's in terms of devotion to Brahman, and also just virtues. Yeah.
Where do those virtues come from? Are they kind of adapted to Christian virtues?
It comes from just different teachings, as far as I know, through it. But I didn't look up like what are those virtues. But a lot of what we consider good and bad actions, permeate into their philosophy and teaching as well.
Is that why they meditate for hours and pray for hours? Is that, I think even Buddhists, they kind of bow 1,000, 100 times, or I don't know.
Yeah.
How many times?
Yeah.
That's Buddhism.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's
That's
similar.
similar. It's all works.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's the third one.
The third one is, I don't know if I said it, to be dedicated to various religious ceremonies and rites. So I don't know if you guys know, but burying the dead and all those things, it's kind of gross. I don't know if you guys know about all of that, how that burning the bodies, throwing them to rivers. Yeah. What's the river again? Is that the Ganges? Ganges River, yeah. So that's all part of Hindu, is that they burn the body and specifically throwing it into that river. Like that person will have like success or like have a better reincarnated life or something that gives them an advantage to a better life. So there are a lot of just, things like that.
Wash your clothes in that river, don't you?
Yes. So that's where you see a lot of the rituals, a lot of the different cultural things that kind of seep into this religion as well. Okay, so in light of all the things that we talked about, I also wanted to spend a good chunk of time in terms of, well, how do we respond as Christians? You know, and how, if we were ever put in a situation where we're witnessing to Hindus, Hindu people, how would we do so? So, first, I want to do two preliminary ones, which is that to Hindu, if we were to approach a Hindu person and talk to them about God, that doesn't really mean much to them, because to them, everything, right, visible, invisible, is God or a manifestation of God. And so that's where a lot of that pantheistic quality of their religion seeps in. So like, you're God, and that's God, and that's God. So if you were to talk about like the one true God from the Christian perspective, they'd be like, oh, he's just one of many other gods, right? So it doesn't mean much when you say that word to a Hindu person. So one way to do that is to really clarify that, no, I'm a follower of a specific person, which is Jesus Christ, and really going into the gospel. And I'll talk about that a little bit more too. The other thing is you want to clarify when you use the word Christian to a Hindu person. Hindus don't look favorably upon Christians, nor the name Christian as well. In fact, sometimes if you were some Hindus will interpret the idea of being a Christian as somebody that equals a beef eater, someone who eats meat or red meat or beef. And so that's what they understand Christians to be. And to them, that's very obnoxious. Because, why? For Hindus, cows are one of their favorite gods, most worshipped deities or gods. So to think of someone eating a cow is very disrespectful, right? And so they associate then a lot of times with Christian people with like people who eat cows and meat, and they're like, I don't want to associate with you, or I don't want to talk to you. So one suggestion is that when you try to reach a Hindu, never introduce yourself as a Christian or using that word. Rather, what you can say is, I'm a disciple or a follower of Christ. And then even to say, and I wish to introduce my guru to you, my teacher, which is Jesus, to you. And then you'll have a better or a welcome hearing. They'll accept, okay, well, tell me about who this Jesus is. I want to learn more about this person. Okay. So a lot of things that we're going to talk about now in terms of witnessing will come back to just the philosophies, the belief systems of Hinduism, and how to kind of start unpacking some of that. So, like I said, Hinduism has a certain flexibility and adaptability through its history and the foundations of this religion and so forth. And because it's so ambiguous, that's actually a very good starting point, I think, for Christians as well. Because it may not be that Hindu belief systems that we can make it falsify or like to make it wrong, but there's a lot of things about Hindu and this religion that aren't verifiable, right? That's not concrete, or like, oh, where did that come from, or where did that teaching originate from, or who is that God, or who wrote these texts and so forth. And so, whereas for us as Christians, the literal history and a lot of the Christian tradition comes from historical facts and historical events. And that's not so clear in Hinduism. So the ideas of with Christianity about like Adam and Eve and Israel as a nation, right? The Exodus, all the different prophets, all of these things, like, they're marked in time with historical evidence that we can trace, whereas in Hinduism, it's hard to kind of verify a lot of these different ancient teachings and sayings. And so that's actually a plus for us as Christians. And one thing that we have talked about in apologetics thus far is that you can prove facts in the Bible, and that's something that gives, Christians a lot of leverage and a lot of, hey, like, this actually happened, right? Remember, one of the Sunday schools I taught was about the factual evidences of the resurrection, right? Like, you can have all these facts down and really point to the historical viability of Christianity, whereas you can't really do that so much with Hinduism. So Christianity has historically rooted characters and events within its narrative that are identifiable through even forensic sciences, archaeology, and even textual criticism. So Hinduism, to conclude there, is that there's a history, but its theology, mythology, and its history are also blurred together, that it becomes difficult to identify where one starts and then where one stops. Like, they're all just so ingrained that it's hard to find the verifiable evidence in all of their different teachings. So a good place to begin then in our talk with a Hindu person is Jesus of Nazareth, as a historical figure that is undeniable, that many scholars, that he came to this earth, he lived life. He was a historical person that lived in this place. And obviously, he's more than that to us. But the fact that he lived in a specific place, he died in a specific time and place, that could be confirmed by historians. Right? You can't really do that so much with Hinduism. There isn't a person associated with their religion, and so there's nothing that's really concrete that they can hold on to. And so that helps and works, I guess, more in our favor. So the historicity of Christianity is a big plus that you can have, I think, great dialogue with in terms of to a Hindu person. Okay. The other one is that I labeled this the futility of reincarnation versus the hope of the resurrection. The futility of reincarnation versus the hope of the resurrection. What's interesting as I was researching too with Hinduism too is that I said before that Hindus believe in this idea of moksha, right, which is salvation or freedom or liberation, to be one with Brahman, the god. But most Hindus believe that moksha or salvation is almost or virtually unattainable, even though they work really hard for it. So they strive, they try to be a good person so that the next reincarnation is favorable and that the next reincarnation after that is favorable. But becoming one with Brahman and as an entity, it's almost like it's such a faraway concept that actually attaining it is not really possible. Right? And so that's why I call it the futility of reincarnation, is that they're working so hard and they're striving so hard, but to what end? If they don't even believe themselves that they can attain salvation, it's like a hopelessness. It's like a despair. Like, well, what's the point of it then? Why am I working so hard? Why am I trying so hard to be a good person then? In the eyes of a Hindu person. So that's actually a good way to kind of talk to them, is like, do you really, when you talk to a Hindu person, like, what's your understanding of moksha or salvation? Do you think you could really attain that? And a lot of them say, no, it's really hard. It's really hard. Whereas then the hope of the resurrection, right? The Christian doctrine of the resurrection really gives a Hindu person a lot of hope when you talk about, the risen Christ, right? And this idea where Jesus, he paid for our sins, as the Bible says, once for all time, once for all, so that you don't have to keep striving, working so hard and trying to attain or earn salvation or attain liberation. In fact, belief in Jesus leads to salvation, right? And that's once and for all. You don't have to keep trying. We don't have to keep working harder or striving more, but that we freely receive it, and it's it. That's it. You're not going to try to do any more on top of that. So we're not adding to the gospel with our works, nor can we even subtract it with our sin or our bad actions or whatever you want to think of it as. Right? So that would give then a Hindu person a lot of hope, right? Is that idea that Jesus paid the penalty for our sins once and for all. And that there doesn't need to be a constant reincarnating of being a better person to attain salvation. Okay? So resurrection, the concept of biblical resurrection, right? It involves one death, right? One life, one mortal body, one new and immortally glorified body. Right? Resurrection happens by divine intervention, is monotheistic, right? Is a deliverance from sin, and will happen ultimately in the end times. Reincarnation, on the contrary, involves multiple deaths, multiple lives, multiple mortal bodies, and no immortal body. And so the question then is, how can we then take their idea of karma and really just infuse hope with the concept of resurrection and of grace and what Jesus has done? So that's what makes Christianity so amazing, I hope, but also so different than many of the different world religions. Is that the cross of Christ is so definitive and it's so complete, and I think we take that for granted sometimes. We're like, oh yeah, Jesus died for my sins. Yeah, I'm thankful. I'm good. I'm saved. I believe in Him. But sometimes I don't think we understand the reality of His death and His resurrection. And it's so liberating to know that it's a once and for all thing, that He paid for our sins on the cross, and that we don't have to keep living a life of constant striving and of earning and of trying to live a better life, or anything like that, because we're already received and we're already embraced by the work of Christ. And so I think in that sense, for a Hindu person too, they could really to embrace the concept then of forgiveness for themselves, developing a heart of gratitude and of hope and of a life of purpose. Those are really things that you can really speak into their lives and give them a lot of hope. Okay. I'll just stop here and then just a little bit more, but any questions or thoughts or else?
Is Hinduism in Southeast Asia really different from Hinduism in India?